that the world central banks have no alternative right now other than to continue to inflate, to continue to pressure their currencies. And how we capitalize on that is very simple. Just bet against it. And that is by holding a hard asset. Hard assets, gold and silver, going back to the mentality of Asia, is they understand that these are units of wealth. They are units of wealth. The dollar is a unit of debt. It's a unit of debt. And what I want people to understand as well is whatever bills that they may have in their pocket right now, these these things are not even theirs. They're owned by the issuing central bank and owed back to the issuing central bank plus interest that they print out of thin air.
Welcome to Rethinking the Dollar. Today I'm excited to have my guest, Mr. Gregory Mannarino. He's the creator and publisher of TraderChoice.net. Today he's joining us to discuss the global economy as well as to give us his thoughts on the future of the dollar. Mr. Mannarino is an active trader of the capital markets as well as an economic commentator who's appeared on various channels throughout the internet. And he's also a published author and he has his own channel on YouTube. So Greg, welcome to Rethinking the Dollar.
Great to be here. I really appreciate you having me on. Thank you.
Well, I came across you about a couple years ago where you made a statement that kind of stood out to me and it made me really begin asking more questions. And you said that I'm probably quote you wrong, but you referred to the coming collapse of it being of biblical proportions. And when you gave that reference, it made me think about like how serious is this when he's referring to something coming that's of something of great magnitude. And so I started watching your channel and start following you and just staying in tune with what you have going on now. And I definitely learned a lot from you. So thank you for doing what you do.
I appreciate you saying that.
All right. Now, before we get into anything, I usually start off with RTD questions. And the first one is, what comes to mind when Gregory Mannarino hears the words rethinking the dollar?
Run from the dollar. That would be the first thing that comes to mind. And bet against it at every chance you possibly have. That's how I would say rethink the dollar. I think that's the only way to think about the dollar. Again, we're existing in an environment where world central banks are printing these. Well, first of all, let's define what the dollar is. It's an unbacked liability being distributed by a bankrupt government. It's not backed by anything. So that's really what it is, and I think people need to understand that.
Right, fair enough there. Now, why, in your opinion, I know in my opinion, I think it's very important. So why would you think it's very important for people to begin taking interest in monetary matters as well as their own personal budget and economic things like that?
Well, the number one thing that people need to understand is we're in an environment that is not sustainable. What I mean by that is world central banks have gotten so, I don't know another word for it, desperate, to keep the system propped up that they've turned the entire financial system upside down by going negative interest rates, suppressing the entire debt market, which is the largest part of this market. And what that has done is created an environment of unbelievable distortions across the spectrum of asset classes. Nothing is real, from currencies to the dollar, to the debt market, to the stock market, to precious metals, and housing, and every other thing you want to think about as an asset. It derives its value off of the debt market. So when you have an environment that is being artificially suppressed here, there's no price discovery mechanism behind anything. So what that does, again, is create, in orders of magnitude, a twisting of the system where nothing is real. And the issue here underlying all of this is this will correct to fair market value at one point. There's no doubt about it. And why am I so certain of this? It's very simple. All we need to do is look back upon history and look at every single bubble that we've ever been in. In my opinion, we are now in the greatest bubble that the world has ever known, and that is this debt bubble. The problem with the debt bubble is it's not just a financial problem. And earlier in the pre-interview, we were talking about millennials here. I think that the millennial person out there, unfortunately, thinks of this as a financial problem. This is not a financial problem. This is a resource issue. We continue to borrow cash from the future to sustain the now in greater and greater amounts, basically robbing the future of the millennial people out there and their children to
Right.
sustain this. This cannot go on forever here. And the ramifications of this debt bubble bursting, which will burst because every single other bubble in history has burst before it without exception, means we're going to be facing a crisis of the currency, rethinking the dollar, and resources are not going to be available to people. This is the issue here. It's not a financial issue. It's a resource problem. And in many ways, the world central banks have created an alternative universe that would not exist in this debt-based economic model. I would urge your listeners to just go to Google and Google this title, Global Debt and the Human Bubble. It's an article that I wrote which will outline this phenomenon that we're talking about right now.
Right. Wow. Wow. That's deep. I was going to ask you, next question was going to be, what would your global state of the economy address entail if you were given a choice? But you kind of answered that all within that question right there, that, it spells trouble. Now, I know as of today, the gold Shanghai exchange is up and running. I know you're a big silver guy. You said that's one of the most, I want to quote you directly, but that's one of the most undervalued assets or rights. We'll get to that.
Yeah,
What,
it
what's,
is.
what,
In
what's your
my
thoughts on
opinion,
that? What's your thoughts to the fact that, just today alone, there's a lot of things happening as far as our price spike. So give us your take on that.
interesting. The price action with regard to, again, this is the paper derivative that we're talking about, but there is the link to the hard asset. The silver took it ripped higher, almost 5%. I think it closed up 4.5% plus a little bit here. Gold also, but we need to think about these things in terms of dollars, especially on this show with
Right.
about the dollar here. The dollar is under a lot of pressure. And anyone out there knows how to read the chart. I urge you to just go to any chart and look up ticker UUP, which is the dollar bullish ETF. You will see that the U.S. dollar has been under pressure since December, and this pressure is going to continue here. So, what could we expect because of that? If the dollar is weakening, anything that is priced in dollars is going to go higher. So in my opinion here, they're going to, they meaning the world central banks, none more so than the Federal Reserve, is going to continue to prop up this thing, inflating the debt bigger and bigger than it is now, crushing the value of the dollar further and further here. And this is why, again, I've been out here for years now, as you're aware, and I've been saying two things that are just so important. Number one is become your own central bank. That means to be betting against the dollar and hoarding hard assets, which are being suppressed right now. We know this for a fact. Whereas from Deutsche Bank, a whole bunch of other banks that are now involved in suppression of these assets, and bet against the debt. Basically, they're one and the same thing. Becoming your own central bank and betting against the debt means to be holding a hard asset. Let me put another perspective on this for your listeners here that maybe they can understand this a little bit better. We've seen this before. Right now, we exist in an environment of risk. What does that mean? Well, it's pretty simple. The world central banks, the Federal Reserve, that stick to the dollar, since this is rethinking the dollar here, is suppressing interest rates artificially, again, not allowing the free market to determine fair value for debt. So what's that has done is create an environment where investors are searching for yield. The only place to go here, again, this is deliberate, is into the stock market. They've reinflated the stock market bubble on the back of a debt bubble here. So the environment now is risk on. Now, we are going to see this flip. At one particular point, we're going to get a risk off environment. And when we get that risk off environment, which I think is not too far off, although this election cycle has a lot to do with what's playing into the markets, once we get this risk off environment, we're going to see the value of hard assets, gold and silver and other hard assets, really manifest themselves. And it's going to be epic, absolutely epic here. Because what people don't get, I know I'm running off the mouth here, with regard to these markets, is cash never goes to money heaven. It simply moves from one set of assets to another. And that's what we're going to witness here. Maybe we're starting to see some of that with regard to the price action of precious metals. Some of the action today in the metals markets, what I want people to understand was about short covering. When people are covering their short positions, in other words, the positions they had that were betting against an asset and they look to get out of it and they cover, you get this spike. So I would not be surprised to see a little pullback here, which is extremely bullish, and set up for another leg higher with regard to precious metals. So that's my take on what's occurring right now and the price action with regard to the precious metals versus the dollar.
Right. Now, it's amazing to me how here locally in the United States of America, the idea of money being metals has never been something that, our generation has been used to for the most part.
Yeah.
And I read an article just a couple hours ago how in China, I'm not sure why, but it was a price surge as far as people purchasing mass amounts of silver there. So obviously, I wonder, is it that the Chinese people in general have an understanding of money, or they're aware of some things that's about to take place as far as some type of monetary change? What are your thoughts about that? Why do you think the Chinese are so informed, or that side is so informed and we're not?
It's part of their culture to have gold and have hard assets over there, not like here. It's very interesting the way people are taught to think here in the United States. And again, we were talking about this a little bit in the pre-interview here. It's unfortunate what the mainstream media is doing to people, keeping them in a frankly dumbed down state, keeping them distracted. That's why, honestly, channels like yours here is so important. Alternative media is where it's at, period. If anyone wants to find out what's really going on, they got to listen to people like you, period. If they want to sit here and listen to the mainstream, well, they can rest assured that they're going to become stupider and stupider. It's the truth.
Yeah.
It's a shame to have to put it into that perspective, but that's really the truth. I really believe that.
Yeah, and I tell people usually by the time it hits the mainstream news, it's already occurred and it's been twisted and tweaked and pulled and stretched to make it to where it's something that you can believe. But it's by the time it's too late. So
it's very sad.
Yeah.
Very sad.
Now, what are some things that beyond what we've talked about so far that's really on Gregory Mannarino's map? What are some things that you're concerned about that you're probably daily watching or more concerned about as the days progress into the year?
Well, I'm trying my hardest here to kind of, again, like you, make people aware of what's going on here and how they can capitalize on it. You don't need to lay down like a sheep and be sheared, period. There are ways that you can make this actually work for you. And we've covered the most important ones already. That is, again, that the world central banks have no alternative right now other than to continue to inflate, to continue to pressure their currencies. And how we capitalize on that is very simple. Just bet against it. And that is by holding a hard asset. Hard assets, gold and silver, going back to the mentality of Asia, is they understand that these are units of wealth. They are units of wealth. The dollar is a unit of debt. It's a unit of debt. And what I want people to understand as well is whatever bills that they may have in their pocket right now, these things are not even theirs. They're owned by the issuing central bank and owed back to the issuing central bank plus interest that they print out of thin air. It's unbelievable.
Right.
That's really it's crazy to think of it in those terms, but that's what these are. That's why these are units of debt. They're not units of wealth. And this is why you hear people like Ben Bernanke coming out saying gold is not money. Meanwhile, in the Constitution of the United States, it says gold is money. So, you choose who you want to believe. Keep this in mind. Ben Bernanke was the same guy who said during the housing meltdown that it was contained to subprime. Look, the world central banks and the central bankers, they never get it right. Either they're monumentally stupid or there's something else going on. So there may be a combination of the two.
Yeah.
You decide how right you think it really is.
Yeah, I literally think, I was talking to a prior guest on how everything seems to be just in one narrow pathway towards destruction to where they know what they're doing. It's just amazing that they can go along with it, knowing that at the end of it, it's going to be disaster for everyone. No one can no one can really win in the end if everyone's in poverty and misery. I mean, that's just how do you win? So it's twisted. It's I don't understand. It goes beyond me, but they
Well,
clearly know what they're doing.
well, this is what they are doing here. They are determined, in my opinion, to create a two-tier society. The middle class is being already systematically wiped out. Now, once this correction occurs, this correction to fair value, which is going to occur, there's no doubt about it. It's a mathematical certainty. The middle class that is heavily invested, let's say in 401k plans and other investment vehicles, that cash is simply going to be transferred from one group of people to the other. So people that understand how to get that cash legally, that's really what it comes down to. For example, the stock market goes down. What do? I go short the market. That means I'm making money while people are losing cash. The cash that's being lost by these people is simply being transferred to people like myself. The large banks are going to do the same thing on a grand scale. And this is where the middle class, again, is going to lose everything. They're not going to be smart enough to realize that they should get out of these things. And their financial advisors only know one thing, and that is, oh, stay in the market. Don't pull it out. Don't pull it. Remember that happened last time. But this is different this time. We had the Federal Reserve that was able to buy debt in a magnitude that we've never seen before. QE1, QE2, Operation Twist, and they're still buying debt now. Understand that. The Federal Reserve has to buy debt in order to suppress interest rates. So if people think that there's not some type of a QE going on, they're definitely misguided. Okay. So again, this is nothing but a massive wealth transfer that's going to eliminate or wipe out the wealth of the middle class, and they'll be easy to control at that particular time. So what are the people going to do? They're going to look towards the government to help them because they're going to have nothing, and this is how the government is going to grow even more ugly and bigger than it is right now. It's so bad. It is so sad.
Right.
But this is going to happen. It's already unfolding. And it's just a terrible thing.
Right.
It is.
Now you hinted at this, and kind of hinting at the whole collapse, like the meltdown collapse, or however people tend to word it. Now your reference that I mentioned in the beginning, the biblical proportions. What would that begin to look like at the smallest level for your average household, mom, dad, kids? What would be some of the beginning signs to where the mom, who may not be in tune to anything, she'll be like, honey, what's wrong? Or something like that, to where she'll be awakened to the reality of what's going on.
Well, again, we are going to see the dollar continue to lose value. That means that the prices of things are going to rise. And it could rise substantially, depending on, again, the severity of this whole thing. Now, I look at everything from polls a lot of ways. You got to be over prepared for everything. If you think of things in a worst case scenario and they don't develop to a worst case scenario, but you're prepared for it, well, you're a lot better off, pretty much. So what people need to understand is there is the distinct possibility here that, all right, let me put another perspective before you even go there. What do we know world central banks have been doing? Well, here in the United States, the Federal Reserve, printing cash out of thin air at a blinding pace. It's been going on now for the better part of a decade, since the beginning of this whole meltdown thing. So right now we exist in an environment where there's all of these extra bills. How they exist is either they're actual bills or they're in digital form, but they're out there. Now, there's the same amount of goods here. So at one particular point, all of these extra bills are going to chase the same amount of goods. And you do not have to be a rocket scientist to figure out what that means. We're going to see a massive spike with regard to the price of things in dollars. Got it? So the reason why we're not seeing that now to the degree that we will be is because of something called money velocity, something I speak about all the time. That is the rate at which cash is moving through an economy. Now, if the money velocity was high, we would see the prices rise rapidly. We have almost no money velocity. In fact, we're at a 4-decade low with regard to money velocity. That's not good for an economy. Money needs to move through an economy for an economy to prosper. So we have that. We have a labor force participation rate also at a 4-decade low. So going back to your question, what can people expect? Again, a much harder lifestyle. Their dollars are not going to buy what they can buy now, and it could be in orders of magnitude So jobs will disappear. Services are going to disappear. Government services, because who's going to want to work for nothing?
Right.
So in a worst case scenario, we will see pandemonium break out on the streets all over the world. There's no doubt about it. 'Cause people are going to lose everything. People don't understand. All they're fixated on is the stock market. Oh, my 401k is going up. The stock market's going higher, so that must mean things are well. Well, that was the same mentality last time, but just before the 2008 meltdown. Stock market was going up. Prices were going up. Everyone was happy. One of my very best friends went out there. What, 5 houses? Five. Okay. Don't do it. Don't do it. Oh, no, he still did it. And he got wiped out. Lives with his mother now. That's how bad it is. I mean, from being wealthy
Wow.
to enough to have 5 houses.
Yeah.
So this is going to happen this time in a much greater magnitude, and people are going to expect the market to bounce back, but it's not going to. It can't. The Federal Reserve has fired every round that they possibly can at this market. They've even gotten so desperate in certain parts of the world where they've gone negative. So you can understand where this is going to go moving forward, and it's going to happen.
Right.
Whether it's in a worst case scenario, I don't know, but you always have to be ready for the worst case.
Right. Now you hinted at Federal Reserve and going negative. My next question is going to be right now, because especially in Europe, several sections have negative interest rates already to where they're beginning to withdraw their cash. And so do
Yeah.
you see the Federal Reserve being the last choice to go into the negative to where, citizens here begin saying, okay, I'm paying now for you to hold my money for what? Or do you see, do you see it getting to that point where we have to go negative here?
In my opinion here, people are being force-fed that there is no inflation. Meanwhile, I say nonsense. It's everywhere. Look at the price of food. It's incredible. The Federal Reserve doesn't count the price of energy or food in their calculation because they say that the prices are transitory. Meanwhile, they've been going up since forever, so they're not transitory. Okay, so if you were to look at right now what the average bank account earns in interest versus the real rate of inflation, we're already negative. We're already negative. So are they going to actually go negative? They may have to do that because, again, the alternative is too horrible to contemplate. If they do not continue to inflate and buy debt and suppress interest rates, again, we're going to face this issue of resources. So they're going to continue to do this, and they may end up going negative at one particular time, or come up with some other scheme, or call it some other name. Again, they can't. They might not use those terms, but that's going to be the reality of it, because that's the reality now. We are actually in a negative interest rate environment here. Their accounts are earning nothing.
Yeah.
And the prices of things are rising, and they're going to rise dramatically, in my opinion, moving forward. When, I don't know,
Right.
but I think there's no doubt that it is going to happen. So let's just get ready for it.
Yeah, and are you one that says that there will probably another round of QE, or will they just spin off something even more creative, as you're kind of hinting at, to make it less obvious that we're trying to flood the system as best we can here? What do you think?
Well, here, look, here's my take on QE here. Supposedly, the Federal Reserve has raised interest rates of 0.25% back in December. Where's the proof of that? The U.S. 10-year yield is at like 1.7 or whatever. The market's not buying it. So I don't know. So the Federal Reserve, they just say something. It doesn't mean it's necessarily happening. And in order for the Federal Reserve to keep interest rates low, they have to get into the market and make it happen. They can't just say it. They can't say, hey, you know what? We're going to keep interest rates low. The Federal Reserve has to print cash out of thin air and buy bonds to suppress rates. So QE is continuing to go on right now. Are they going to institute some other overt QE? I'm sure they will. And they're going to call it something else. They're not going to call it QE. But they are going to come up with some other desperate measure to keep this propped up, at least through the election cycle. All these secret meetings between the Federal Reserve and the White House right now, what do you think they're talking about? How great the economy is? No. They're talking about what they can do to prop this up. That's what they're doing, and I'm capitalizing on this like you have no idea. I mean, anyone that's following my work on my site, traderschoice.net, I'm a trader of these markets. I trade options and derivatives. My last 19 trades, 14 have been profitable. I mean, come on now. That's only because I know what they're going to do. I understand where they're at right now. They're going to continue to keep this propped up. It doesn't mean we're not going to get a pullback here or there. And I'm interested to see what happens next month. But for now, the game remains risk on.
All right. Well, as we draw towards the end of our conversation here, would be remiss if if I didn't get your thoughts on the future of the Federal Reserve note as it is today. What do you think in 2, 4, 5 years, 2, 5, or 10, perhaps that's probably better? What will it look like as far as people's confidence in it? Will there still be confidence here domestically? Because I'm
Mhm.
pretty good to say they won't have it internationally, but what about domestically? Do you still think people will, want to hold on to that Federal Reserve note?
I like how you put that confidence because that's a big concept and it's humongous, actually. It's huge. The whole system is built on confidence, whether it's going to work or not. And I've been trying to tell people that for the longest time. If people lose faith in the system or in their central bank, it's going to be a big problem with regard to the currency. So I do believe people are going to lose confidence to a certain degree and they're losing it now. I mean, if you look at the price of gold and silver since the beginning of the year, it's gone up 20 somewhat percent. That says a lot to me. Again, why? These things are priced in dollars. And we're going to see this environment flip from a risk on to a risk off, like we were saying. People are not going to want to hold these dollars if they continue to lose value here. It's going to make the earnings from the companies look really, really good as the dollar gets weaker. But again, it's all just smoke and mirrors and fake and fraudulent. And it just goes back to my premises that I said at the beginning here, and I've been sitting here for years saying, bet against this debt and become your own central bank, people. You're going to thank me for it down the line.
Well, Gregory Mannarino, give the audience a chance to, get in tune with what you have going on, where to find you for those who may not be familiar with you, who maybe come across you for the first time, how to stay in tune with what you have going on.
Absolutely. I urge everyone to go to my website, traderschoice.net. I have a lot of stuff on there. I give away a free ebook. It's a 197-page ebook. It's absolutely 100% free, no catches or anything. I just want people to have it. It'll explain a lot of this, what we just spoke about to them. It's been downloaded over 150,000 times already. It's probably up to 160,000 by now. I hope people just start to pay attention to what's going on and start to rethink the dollar.
My man, Gregory, great talking to you. Thank you for sitting down with me. Look forward to continue to follow your work. You do a great job of breaking it down to us. So thank you.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, this concludes my conversation with Gregory Mannarino from TradersChoice.net. Hope you found the conversation to be informative as well as educational. I want to encourage you to click the subscribe button for more RTD interviews as well as monetary news updates. Leave us a comment below. I would love to get your thoughts on this interview. Looking forward to bringing you more interviews. Until next time.